English or
Sí,
in
sí, sí,
Spanish?
in English, in English.
We are live.
Okay, then. First
you.
of all, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to have this talk to you about these matters. I'm so sorry that these difficult times make it impossible to make it more personal. Live, I used to attend all sort of university events, talks, exchange of views. I do pay a lot of tribute to universities' exchange of views in my agenda as member of the European Parliament. But anyhow, I am also pleased to be of service to this gathering, to this talk about memory, memory as a value, and guaranteeing memory for civil values and cohesion across the European Union. So if you allow me, I'll exchange some views about the European Parliament experience on the matter, because we have actually spent a substantial amount of time caring about citizens' rights and values, because we have not forsaken, not for a second, that the European Union is about that, precisely about that. It's about values, it's about principles, it's about common values, it's about citizens' rights. And this is worth noticing, because these fundamentals happen to be challenged for the past few years, in coincidence, of course, with the European Union submerging itself in the worst crisis ever. Got started precisely when the Lisbon Treaty and the Charter of Fundamental Rights both entered into force, more than 10 years now. But precisely in coincidence, in timely coincidence, with this entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, which enshrines finally the so-called Copenhagen criteria, which are the common values, which are binding for all of the member states, including fundamental rights, protection of minorities, separation of powers, independence of judiciary, and of course, rule of law and democracy. Precisely in coincidence with that entry into force, the European Union has been linking one episode of crisis after another. We had the Great Recession, we had the sovereign debt, we had the Brexit, we had the liberal regimes challenging common values, and finally this pandemic, which has posed so many troubles for mutual trust and for sticking to those common values when coming up with a common response to these shared challenges of us. But despite all that, we have kept an eye all the way on citizens' rights, and that also has an impact on the contribution of the European Parliament to the so-called budgetary making process, the budgetary procedure, the special budgetary procedure. Of course, our consent is required to unleash the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, but we are a budgetary authority according to the treaty. So we are heavily involved in discussing with the Council the figures which are to fund this role, which is to be played by citizens' rights and values in the next budget. That was part of the discussion I just heard. And I'm sure you know that the position of the European Parliament is financing the so-called Rights and Values Program, of which I happen to be the rapporteur as chair of the Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs of the European Parliament, with 1.5 billion, 1.5 billion euros, of which citizens' participation, the citizens program, is to be funded with an allocation of at least 371 million euros for the coming MFF. And that is why we link with this message that we pay importance to citizens' rights with the issue of memory, as you have been discussing, because we understand that the very idea of financing a special strand, a special program with citizens' participation helps precisely citizens' understanding of EU history, encouraging democratic participation of citizens at a European scale level. And we understand by that it is important to reflect on European cultural diversity. The European Union is about integrating diversity. It's about united in diversity. And that takes, in my understanding, in my view, that takes uh, a minute of thought to the very idea of contributing to citizens' understanding of European history. Where does the European Union come from? It comes from a series of civil wars at a continental level across the European Union, massacres and disasters, protracted warfare across the European continent, and of course the terrible experience of First World War, the Great War, and Second World War, and of course the rise of totalitarian regimes of different kinds, Nazism, fascism, but also Stalinism, totalitarian communist regimes. And it takes also a thought to commemorate the victims of those crimes. And that is why we have cared about organizations, activities, research, public debates, which dwell on these matters. And we have adopted throughout the years a number of important resolutions. Although this thought and reflection on the importance of memory and where does the European Union come from and the principles we should stick to, this is not precisely a lawmaking field of competence for the European Parliament as a lawmaker. I happen to chair the committee which has the heaviest workload in the House, the heaviest share, the largest share of the lawmaking files which are dealt with by the European Parliament in all, almost a quarter, 25%, including, of course, all those fundamental rights files. But the resolutions we have adopted are not lawmaking pieces, are not acts of legislative acts of legislation, but resolutions in which the majority of the European Parliament has made up its mind as to the importance of caring about historic memory as a milestone to build up a better future for Europe. The latest chance we did that was about the resolution we adopted September 2019, 19 September 2019, about the importance of historic memory for the future of Europe. In this resolution, of course, we overview all of the component elements of that record of us, of the European Parliament, including the statements being made by those members of the Commission, of the College of Commissioners, which are more heavily involved in these matters. Let's say Franz Timmermans, fundamental rights and rule of law. Let's say Vera Jourova, values and transparency in the latest years. But we remind the resolutions that we have been adopted of the past 15 years at least, ever since 2005 and onwards, but particularly when the Lisbon Treaty entered into force. We, of course, keep an eye on the framework decision, which is binding law in criminal matters. Before being Lisbonized, before the Lisbon Treaty entered into force and made the European Parliament a lawmaker in criminal matters more than ever before, there were framework decisions, and there is one framework decision devoted to fighting against racism and xenophobia by means of criminal law. There is also a Prague Declaration on the European conscience on totalitarian regimes. We also have a directive adopted in 2012, as I was chair of this committee, to protect victims of serious crimes. And there is a chapter devoted to the memory of the victims who fought against totalitarian regimes. But having said this, the main component elements of this resolution have to do, of course, with the commemoration of the terrible impact of the notorious so-called Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which was the outset of the Second World War, because the Nazi regime and Soviet Union agreed to divide the territory of Poland in zones of shared influences. And as a consequence of that Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, August the 23rd, 1939, came about the invasion of Poland, the Nazi invasion of Poland. And that was, of course, the signal for the beginning of the Second World War and its terrible disasters. So, considering the importance of those milestones in the European history, which are so crucial to understand where does the European Union comes from, the resolution condemns all totalitarian regimes, authoritarian regimes that have been taking place on Europe, causing victims and making an influence which has to be fought all the way up until the present, up until the very present day. I would highlight the importance of certain paragraphs of this resolution, which I understand might be of particular relevance for the Spanish situation, for the Spanish approach to the scope of this resolution. Paragraph 7 condemns historic revisionism and glorifications of those who have cooperated with totalitarian regimes, regression to fascism, the rise of racism, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance across the European Union. And the resolution calls member states to condemn all acts which undermine the values on which the European Union is founded, which is tolerance, integration of diversity, and respect for individual rights, fundamental rights, including, of course, respect for minorities. The same goes as paragraph 10 of this resolution, in which the resolution asks, on behalf of the European Parliament, for a common culture of historic memory, rejecting all crimes of fascist and Stalinist regimes and other totalitarian or authoritarian regimes of the past, in order to promote in younger generations, particularly in younger generations, a better understanding and resilience, it says, against the threats that are now haunting European democracy and democracy across the member states, particularly promoting culture, education in diversity, the openness of diversity, the understanding of European member states as open societies, and including the teaching of the atrocities of Second World War, Holocaust, dehumanization, systematic dehumanization of victims of totalitarian regimes of all kinds. There is another paragraph I would like to share with you. It's the one which, in paragraph 12, the European Parliament asks the Commission to finance effectively projects promoting historic memory with all the proper resources, sufficient resources, particularly within the framework of citizens' rights and Europe for citizens, so that values and rights are properly enhanced, not only in the commemoration and remembrance of victims of totalitarianism, but also in the teaching of how it was and where do we come from for younger generations. And that's the very nature of the program Rights and Values, of which I happen to be the rapporteur, and which is now negotiated with the Council in the framework of the unblocking of all this package, in which MFF, budget, Next Generation EU, we call it in Spain the Recovery Fund, and the rule of law conditionality, which is also a regulation which is encompassed in this package, which is to be finally unblocked by the Council in the coming days. Now they are precisely discussing all of these issues. And finally, I would also refer to the importance of paragraphs 18, 17, 19 of this resolution, in which we express as European Parliament our concern about the continued use of symbols, the symbolic dimension of totalitarian regimes in the public sphere. And we encourage all of the member states to remove those symbols and to get rid of them for good, insofar as there are actually a number of member states which have forbidden the public exhibition of totalitarian, fascist, or Nazi symbols of all kinds. And in paragraph 18, we remind that some member states have not tackled the issue of public space commemorating or glorifying totalitarian regimes, which leads to a misunderstanding, a misperception, if not something worse, about the importance of those totalitarian and aggressions against the founding values of the European Union, which actually led to Second World War. The same goes with paragraph 19, in which we strongly condemn, the fact that there are still across the European Union political forces, political platforms, extremists, xenophobes, Europhobes, whatever they call themselves, which resort more and more so to a systematic distortion of historic facts, to the spread of a complete reversal of facts which have been established by historians, and promoting symbols and rhetorics which are not only in hindsight the totalitarian propaganda that we had seen 100 years ago and in the 30s of the 20th century as racism and anti-Semitism, but also hatred, hate speech, and hate crimes against the current minorities across the European Union, be them Roma community, be them LGBTI, be them Jewish communities. There is a rise of anti-Semitism also in a number of member states of the European Union, which is an issue that we have to take care for. And finally, we call the member states to guarantee the proper implementation of the framework decision against racism, xenophobia, hate speech, and hate crime. We are caring more and more about hate speech and hate crime, and we call member states to forbid, to ban for good, effectively, not only neo-fascist and neo-Nazist groups, but also foundations or associations aimed to glorify fascism or any form of totalitarianism. Of course, within the parameters of respect of the constitutional dispensations, legal order, and national jurisdictions, which are to be dealing with these matters. The point here is that we have to promote in European citizens a culture which is consistent with European values which are enshrined as binding in Article 2 of the Treaty of European Union. That is why the Libe Committee, which I chair, has put so much energy for years to complement the cumbersome procedure of Article 7 to sanction those member states in a backsliding regression against European values. And we have, of course, noticed the risk of serious breach of European values that has been taking place in some particular member states of the European Union that we all have in mind. with the so-called rule of law conditionality, precisely to make the point that ever since the Lisbon Treaty and the Charter entered into force, those values are no longer wishful thinking, are no longer requirements, not only to enter the club. And once you enter the club, you may get rid of them. But they are binding all the way. As long as you are in the European Union, you have to stick to those principles. Those are the reflections I wanted to share, appreciating the chance to talk to you. If I may be of use, it'll be my pleasure. Thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Juan Fernando López. From the last year when we proposed this taking stock on European remembrance public policies, we fought in terms of intellectual, but also interacting with different networks on remembrance and citizenship to mix these values with the uses of the past, but in the present, and with the challenges on the present and about the future. And we have to thank you for your works, of course, but also for your work and for your fight. And because we heard some challenges before the summer about this program, and they are the many challenges that, of course, the European Union we are confronted with. But we hope that this new budget that is very, very, very real good news in these times of really quite bad news all over, and for not only for the program as the people from the Commission and the European Parliament we have discussed these days, but also for all the citizenship and the future of the democracies in the Europe, and all the resolutions and the aspects dealing with historical, and not only historical memory, but remembrance, are a lot to do with public policies nowadays. And as you may know, of course, there is this big law in Spain who is currently being reformed and taking a lot of these points that it has to be shared in many. Well, it's my wish. It's the European Observatory of Memory's wish. It has to be shared in many other countries, not only in Europe, of course, no? To reinforce this system of democracies and these values. And we believe on that, and we are very thanks. This year it's time also to say thank you to all the participants, also the institutions, the House of European History too. Martí Grau from Jean Monnet House also is here, I think, in connection. I can see also Gil Pelayo from the agency, Johannes and the others from the Commission. It was shorter than the other years, but I think it's important to keep discussing, to keep reflection, to repeat next year, not online, we hope not online, to improve all these discussions, to take all these notes, to make more questions about that. And of course, we are here to promote these events, to promote these discussions, and to help also. Has a think tank, has a not only European, also international organization, our association and our foundation at the University of Barcelona. We are working in this, and we have our main tools in this and main goals. And Martí, I give you the floor if you want to add something, please.
Thank you very much.
Jean Monnet House.
Thank you very much, Jordi. Well, again, on behalf of the House of European History and the Jean Monnet House, we are administratively together in the same unit, the European Parliament. But I would like to say thanks to the European Observatory for Memories to be, again, joining forces in the organization of Taking Stock year after year. It's the third edition, as Jordi has pointed out. And we do hope that in next year already we'll be able to host again physically the event, either in Brussels, House of European History, or in Aujaret, Jean Monnet House. Just a couple of very quick ideas. I think it was very important to hear from the different European institutions the programs specifically for commemoration, because it's a dimension that has been maybe added more recently to the priorities, and it has been very good to know that there has been a raise in the funding that has been allocated to those actions. And then in terms of Jean Monnet House, also I would like to remind that in our presentation we highlighted the role of Jean Monnet and of the Schuman Declaration, but also to highlight the idea that Jean Monnet, of course, is a brand. It's many things, but it's also a brand. And it's a brand that is shared also by the institutions. The European Commission has the European, the Jean Monnet actions, the Jean Monnet shares of excellence, etc. So that is a testimony also on how the memories attached to Jean Monnet have produced something, have produced a brand that is very meaningful today. And of course, for all people and for organizations. And I will maybe end with a quotation from Jean Monnet. He used to say, we don't form coalitions of states, we unite people. So from that point of view, of course, is a message that goes directly to the core of our business here, which is like remembrance and to unearth the bonds of solidarity and the overcoming of war that has been a trend in the last 70 years, I should say. Well, thank you very much, Jordi, again, and I hope we can continue working together. And again, we'll be happy to accompany all the actions of the observatory. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you, Fernanda, for your technical support also, and all the team, and all the colleagues who've been participating as speakers. Many hugs, and let's